Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 127. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are going to be going over a beat-up team. And admittedly, initially when I left this strategy for the end, I kinda ruined myself a little bit, because we have had beat-up on quite a few teams before this. Galark, Mouseape, Fiark, and any team with Mouseape come to mind. So I did leave myself not the most ideal mons to click beat up into, but we're gonna be doing it because beat up is a strategy that has you use this variable move called beat up, where all healthy allies aid in damaging the target, which basically means that you use the attack stat, like instead of using the actual Pokemon who uses the move beat up, you use the attack stat to deal varying base power. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but if you have higher attack Pokemon, then the beat up does more. But more often than not, the reason that you are using beat up is because it is a really good side attacking move, because it hits multiple times, so you can proc things like stamina on other Pokemon, which are things that we've done in the past. And you can proc the ability Justified, which we'll go over right away. Justified raises the attack stat of a Pokemon whenever it is hit by a dark type move. So what we're going to want to be doing is side targeting the beat up into our Justified Pokemon, giving them an attack boost, and then having them destroy everything in front of us. And I'm not crazy about Justified. I think Justified is probably the weakest of the side attack abilities that I can think of right now, at least, unless you have like Whimsicott and Terrakion, who is definitely the strongest form of side beat up into a Justified mon. But obviously Terrakion is not in this regulation because we have no legendary Pokemon in this regulation. But we're going to give it a shot, and we're going to see how it works out for specifically just a beat-up team, pretty much, and we'll get to Poltergeist and Sawsbuck when we get to them. But for now, we're going to talk about Sneasel, who, of course, has the beat-up, but also has the triple axle for dealing some pretty solid Ice-type damage, and then also the Ice Shard for dealing some okay priority Ice-type damage, and the Fake Out just to try and slow down the opponent for just a turn. And the reason that we are running Sneasel over Weavile is because Sneasel has a lower attack stat because it is not a fully evolved Pokemon. But we also get the Inner Focus ability, as we saw when we used Hisui and Sneasel on the Inner Focus team. Sneasel is another Inner Focus Mon, which is an ability that Weavile does not get, which means that we cannot be intimidated, but we can also not be made to flinch, and we really don't want our setup Pokemon getting flinched, because then that immediately just breaks our setup. So we also have the Focus Sash so that we can take at least one hit on Sneasel as long as the opponent doesn't have a variable move. And we're Terra Ice because the Terrestrialization on Sneasel should never matter. You should really be trying to Terrestrialize like Arcanine or Lucario or Poltergeist. Next up on the team, we have Maushold, our second beat-up Pokemon, and Maushold's beat-up is going to be a little bit weaker than Sneasel's. Sneasel's can at least maybe use it offensively sometimes, but Maushold is pretty much never going to be using the beat up offensively. Instead, we have the Super Fang in order to cut the opponent's HP in half. And we also have the Follow Me to redirect away damage, and we have the Friend Guard in order to make the Pokemon that is next to Maushold tankier once we have them set up. Then they can take an extra hit or two, maybe, as long as Maushold is on the field. And Maushold is going to be Covert Cloak so that we're not getting faked out, and we are Terra Grass on the Maushold so that we are not getting redirected away by the Rage Powder, because we need to click our beat up into our side Pokemon, and getting redirected into that would not be great. But also Terra Grass helps us ignore the Sleep Powder and the Spore that would put us to sleep on the Maushold. Next up, we have our first Justified Pokemon, which is Arcanine. And on our Arcanine, we're just running a bunch of coverage moves in the Flare Blitz as our big, strong Fire-type move. And I can see running a bunch of other Fire-type moves in here, like Fire Fang, Flame Charge. As long as you're getting your attack up, it doesn't matter too much what you pick, but the different damages amount will matter in different scenarios. Just pick any fire type stab move here pretty much. And then we have the Terra Blast for Terra Fairy, so that we can have fairy coverage on Arcanine, which will help it to beat things like dragons. And Arcanine also running the close combat, so that we can have the fighting coverage, and the Psychic Fangs, so that we can have the psychic coverage, but it also allows us to destroy some screens that might allow the opponent to live some of our attacks, like the Aurora Veil or the Reflect. And we are the goggles on Arcanine, just so that Arcanine's attacks are not getting redirected by the Breach Powder, but also so that it is not getting put to sleep by Spore or Powder moves. Next up, we have Lucario, our second justified Pokemon, and this Lucario is pretty similar to Arcanine in its purpose, in that we gave it just a bunch of different coverage moves, and we're going to use those coverage moves in order to try and deal super effective damage into the opponent. Meteor Mash, really strong physical steel type move, and Dream Punch, really strong fighting type move that also allows us to heal, and the Extreme Speed gives us some pretty nifty priority for hitting the opponent for those times that we could not quite finish off the KO. And the Crunch gives us another dark type option to side attack into one of our own Pokemon, whether that be Arcanine or Poltegeist, who we'll talk about in a second, in order to get off the Justified on Arcanine. But Lucario is going to be our first instance of us using Muscle Band, and I didn't want to give Lucario a Life Orb just because Lucario already really values its HP because it's really squishy, and if we're going to be boosting our attack on Lucario and trying to pick up one-hit KOs, then the Muscle Band, a slight multiplier over the something like a Life Orb or an Expert Belt, giving us a ever so slightly higher multiplier, probably doesn't come up too often. And we are the Terra Stellar on... Did I say Terra Stellar again? How is this possible? I can't... It just happens. We're going to be using the Stellar Terra, another multiplier for wherever the Muscle Band multiplier doesn't quite get us there. We can at least maybe get there using Stellar Terra. Next up, we have Poltegeist, and Poltegeist will be taking advantage in the beat-up a little bit differently than our justified Pokemon, and that is because we have the Weak Armor, which whenever we are hit by a physical attack, it will increase our speed at the cost of lowering our defense. And I'm not sure how much damage Sneasel will do into Poltegeist if it clicks side beat-up. I feel like it might kill Poltegeist, a very real chance there. But side mouse hold into Poltegeist should be safe, especially with the friend guard, so you can max out your speed on Poltegeist, and then once you've maxed out your speed, you also have the weakness policy gets activated, so you get 2 attack boosts and 2 special attack boosts, which will mean that you have a very, very strong stored power once you can click that, and obviously in combination with your Terra Psychic, you get Stab on the stored power as well. And your Ghost typing and your Psychic typing will both be weak to Dark, so as long as you're getting hit by the Dark type move, then you'll be proccing your weakness policy. We also have the moves Shadow Ball for dealing our good stab Ghost type damage, and Giga Drain to maybe try and heal ourselves, but also so that we can have a slightly better matchup into water types. And we have the Shell Smash just in case we don't want to try and proc our own weak armor or weakness policy. Just getting off the Shell Smash sometimes works. And lastly on the team, we are slotting on Sawsbuck just so that Sawsbuck can be in 128 teams. That's the only reason Sawsbuck is really here. Sawsbuck was originally supposed to be on the Levani team as a Chlorophyllmon. That didn't work out. Instead, we are doing the more annoying thing with Sawsbuck with the Syringrace ability, which will double the effect of all secondary effects, and Headbutt has a 30% chance to flinch, which means that you also now have a 60% chance to flinch, which if you remember Togekiss with Air Slash also had a 30% chance to flinch. This is kind of like Togekiss, except Togekiss could at least miss like 5% of the time. We're not missing with Headbutt unless we attack into a ghost. And Sawsbuck is, of course, at least noticeably faster than Togekiss. And we also have the Horn Leech in order to try and heal ourselves, and we have the Stomping Tantrum just for the ground coverage. But definitely the main goal of Sawsbuck is to just click that Headbutt and get the 60% chance to flinch something on the turn that our support, either Sneasler or Mousehold, has died, and we have either Arcanine, Lucario, or Poltegeist set up. We need the Headbutt flinch. It's the only reason Sawsbuck is here. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Alright, first up we have a Sand team, and that's all I have to say about the team.
Volcarona is going to lead, and Goldango is also going to be here, and we have Mousehold and Lucario, and we swap in Arcanine because I thought Volcarona might go for the Heat Wave here, and I wanted Arcanine to obviously resist it, and then we could side proc it with into Arcanine, but this is actually a defensive Volcarona with Rage Powder, so it Rage Powders away the beat up, which is a little unfortunate. We can't go for Terra Grass there because obviously we would get Heat Wave. Arcanine is going to Helping Hand as Volcarona Rage Powders. Shadow Ball brings Arcanine down pretty low, but because Arcanine is the safety goggles, we ignore the Rage Powder, so we get to KO their Goldango, taking out that pretty notable threat there. Now we bring in Poltegeist. Mousehold redirects, and we double miss a Heat Wave, which is super lucky. Taunt into Mousehold, which means that Poltegeist now gets off its Shell Smash, and Poltegeist goes for the Terra Psychic here. Stored Power is going to nuke Volcarona, and we get a tiny bit of beat up chip into Gyarados. Gyarados gets off the Thunder Wave into Poltegeist, which now makes it a little bit slow, and Tyranitar sets up the sand. We can bring Lucario back onto the field to Giga Drain some health off of Tyranitar. Unfortunately, Poltegeist does not live the knockoff from Tyranitar, otherwise it would have activated our weakness policy and our weak armor, and then we probably would have been good there, but even at 100% health, we could not take the knockoff. But now we get to bring Mousehold back onto the field, and it is time to use our 2 beat-ups into Lucario to give it a 2x attack boost, but the Drain Punch isn't quite enough to take Tyranitar there because I went for the Terra Flying. Gyarados Thunder Waves, Tyranitar low kicks into Lucario, and everybody except for Lucario takes Sand Chip. Pick off Tyranitar with extreme speed as Mousehold redirects there, and if Mousehold got paralyzed, we probably would have lost the game because I think Waterfall would have definitely taken out Lucario. But Lucario gets the Drain Punch into Gyarados to get just enough health to survive maybe another Waterfall, as if Mousehold didn't get to redirect there. But now we get to extreme speed in order to take out Gyarados. And that's the end of the game. Here we have a team with a Bastiodon. Volcarona again is going to enter the field, and Grimmsnarl is maybe going to support it with the screens. Does go for the Reflect, but we get our full side beat up into Arcanine, which means that Arcanine is going to end this turn with a 3x attack boost as long as it doesn't get knocked out here. And Flare Blitz is going to be able to KO Volcarona through the Reflect. So a pretty decent spot. Parting shots out with the Grimmsnarl, which I guess Parting Shot would activate Justified, shouldn't it? I don't know, actually. That feels wrong, me saying it. Do you have to take Dark Tape damage in order for Justified to proc? I'm not exactly sure on that one. But either way, the Grimmsnarl Parting Shots out on Mousehold in order to bring in Dragapult, basically for free, as we beat up Bastiodon because I figured that it was going to be sturdy, and we Flare Blitz into Bastiodon as we take some recoil damage. Bastiodon is trying to set up with the Iron Head. We Follow Me away the Dragon Darts from the Dragapult, and Close Combat is going to be able to finish off Bastiodon there. Now we get to bring Sneasel onto the field, and I retreated there because I didn't want Arcanine to die quite yet. But the Dragapult goes for Dragon Darts, and both Pokemon take some damage from the Dragon Darts. Triple Axle comes out into Dragapult and brings it pretty low, but unfortunately they decide to double the Sneasel there, which means that it goes down, and we Terra Fairy there so that Lucario can take both Dragon Darts, and thankfully it barely lives it and gets the Crunch off into Dragapult, and we get the Terra Fairy Terra Blast off into Grimmsnarl, and Grimmsnarl can only target one slide, and it decides to take Lucario, as Terra Blast is able to do enough damage to take out Grimmsnarl. So I feel like in this game especially, it's really easy to show how you can gain a lot of momentum really quickly with a beat up strategy, but then just absolutely lose it once the opponent brings in their next Pokemon and they're faster than you. Here we have a balanced team with Magmar and Dragapult. And here we're going to see Poltegeist and Mousehold lead into Sneasler and Magmar. Here we're going to protect Mousehold so that we don't get close combated, and we're not being too threatened by Poltegeist. Like, Sneasler could be Throat Chop and Magmar could be Taunt. But thankfully, the Magmar just tries to redirect as the Dire Claw goes into Mousehold there, and we are able to get off the Shell Smash on Poltegeist. Now we swap in Lucario
maybe for the sack, but also maybe just to try and save Mousehold for a bit, as we do catch the Dark Claw on our Steel type, which is pretty nice. Extreme Speed does a little bit less than half to Sneasler, as Shadow Ball is able to take out Magmar, and Dark Claw does proc our weak armor, but it also gets the Dark Claw poison, which is a bit unfortunate. Sneasler goes Terra Ghost here as we tell her Stellar Terra Lucario in order to try and KO Sneasler to guarantee that roll, but the Ghost makes it immune. And even with the Giga Drain damage there, Poltegeist is probably going to get knocked out, but Primarina decides to actually go for Haze, which means that Lucario gets to stick around at least. Here we see Lucario Extreme Speed in order to take out Primarina, as Sneasler goes for the close combat into Lucario in order to take it out, and Poltegeist gets off the dying Shadow Ball as it goes down to the poison. So now it is our two Pokemon versus their one Pokemon, and their one Pokemon is Dragapult, who is able to just outspeed and click Outrage into us, and Psychic Fangs unfortunately does not do enough damage, and we used our Terra on Lucario, so we could not change into a Fairy type in order to use our Fairy type move to defeat Dragapult. So I think in this game I just rushed the Terra a little bit too early. Like, the Sneasler being Terra Ghost was pretty unusual, but I really don't think it was necessary for me to use the Terrestrialization on Lucario when I had the Poltegeist pretty well set up. Lucario could have just hit Primarina there instead. And lastly, we have a battle against a Trick Room Tailwind team with Chandelure. So we're going to lead Sawsbuck and Sneasler into their Indeedee and Ursaluna. It seems pretty likely that they want to protect and then go for the Trick Room. So we click the Beat Up into Indeedee, which is going to deal quite a bit of super effective damage, and then we get the Headbutt into Indeedee, which does trigger the Rocky Helmet, but Indeedee gets the 60% chance to flinch. So now we're in a pretty good spot. We can afford to just click Beat Up into Indeedee in order to take it out, and we can recover some health with the Horn Leech into Ursaluna, doing some big super effective damage. Ursaluna doesn't like that, clicks Facade into the Sawsbuck, and Sawsbuck goes down. Thank you for your service, Sawsbuck, very cool. We do the side Beat Up into Arcanine in order to give Arcanine the attack boost, but since we lost Sawsbuck, we only get a 2.5 times attack boost, but that's enough for our Psychic Seed or Psychic Fang to take out the Ursaluna. Unfortunately, Sneasler gets burnt here on going down to the Sash, so Sneasel is not going to be able to live the turn, and we now have a 2 against 2. We could Beat Up on the Glade just because I thought Glade was a pretty easy target for a Focus Sash, and we weren't being too threatened by Torkoal unless it was Earthquake or Earth Power. But Beat Up is able to chip Glade, but Arcanine is faster than Glade since it's on a Trick Room team, and Psychic Fangs is super effective and in Psychic Terrain, but Torkoal actually reveals that it's Clear Smog, which is yet another counter to us trying to be single target justified. But the Super Fang and Psychic Fangs combo is enough to bring Torkoal to the point where it is ready to quit. Yeah, that was the Let's Beat 'em Up team, and I think this team is probably going to be the team that suffers the most from being the second to last team. And in a way, it is kind of the last team, because I've had the actual idea of the last team planned since like day 2. I knew exactly what the team was going to be. Tomorrow's team is going to be something special, that's all I'm going to say, but it's a little rude of me to talk about another team when I'm already recapping the current team that's on the screen. But the current team that's on the screen obviously has problems. It is not perfect, but side Beat Up justified is a very real strategy that you should be aware of 100% and know how to beat by mostly not playing too defensively into it. Like, as long as you can overwhelm the justified Pokemon, because its name isn't Terrakion, who has a spread physical move, then you're fine. Oh, and also Sawsbuck. Don't let the Sawsbuck get you. The Sawsbuck will headbutt flinch you every time. Get rid of the Sawsbuck at all cost. But again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one, the last one, probably one of my favorite ones, tomorrow.